Hello, I'm Kevin Wood, your moderator for today. We also have online with us, we've got Balaji, we've got Vin. Um, Balaji's from SUSE, Vin is from Microsoft, and they're going to be telling us about Linux for the DBA, which I'm looking forward to learning or learning about. Let's see. And why is there we go. And we'd like to thank our sponsors, of course.
Kevin,
Always.
can you dismiss
Yep.
your instant messenger or whatever it is that's telling us
Yep.
about? Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Thank you. As always, like to thank our sponsors who make this possible. And for those of you, past summit is always a good opportunity to learn about a number of different technologies and deep dive training. Always good to attend. For those of you who are desperately trying to connect and get that barcode, um, the slides will be available after, so you'll be able to get it from there. Get your own copy of it, or you'll be able to get your own copy. Dead Expert Series now on demand. So past Summit 2018, you can actually see those recordings. And again, you've got a barcode. So Microsoft Roadshow, if you register, there may be a free event near you and hear them talking about innovations with SQL Server 2019. And yes, I was shocked to hear that that was out already too. And I'm planning on getting it and playing with it. Upcoming SQL Saturdays, if you have not been to one, go. These things are fantastic. Every chance I have the opportunity to attend one, I will, and hopefully next month you will see the one in Raleigh, which is coming up in April, which I'm going to attend. PASS, Professional Association for SQL Server, that is us. Definitely follow us and get your free membership. Okay, free membership. That means even I can afford it. There are a number of virtual groups. This is one of them. So hopefully you'll be able to find something that will interest you and advance your professional development. Our speakers for today, we've got Balaji from SUSE, we've got Vin from Microsoft. And to tell you the truth, I was shocked to find out that SQL Server is going to run or does run on Linux. I've been working with SQL Server for a while, so this was fall off my chair, jaw dropping to the ground moment. So I am not going to read this to you. If you got here, obviously you are literate and can read for yourself. Give you a moment there. And why don't I turn it over to the folks that you really came here to listen to? Where are we here? Is it? Uh, oh, come on. And make them, oh, to presenter. Yes. And Balaji and Vin, you're it. No touchbacks.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Vin, and today we're going to cover, actually, just to take a step back, my name is Vin, and I work at Microsoft here on the SQL Server engineering team. Today, we're actually going to be covering Linux fundamentals for SQL Server on Linux, and a big part of that will be covering some of the key concepts, as well as some of the commands you'll use to actually manage the SQL Server process on a Linux host. Some of the main scenarios we'll be covering for that will be around installing SQL Server, which will introduce package managers and how to use them to acquire software through packages, managing SQL Server, and in this area we're going to be covering some of the processes used, how processes are managed and controlled by the system here. And we'll also talk about how users can actually control the SQL Server process from the Linux host. And the last main component will be covering, some of the monitoring and observability aspects of the SQL Server process, again, from the Linux perspective, such as viewing process stats, as well as looking at some of the logs. Now, we won't be able to cover everything you'll need to know about Linux fundamentals, but hopefully by the end of the session, you'll be fairly familiar with some of the concepts, and hopefully you'll be able to get rolling on your own as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to Balaji to actually get started with package managers.
Yeah, thanks, Vin. So we'll talk about Linux package manager. So before talking to Linux package manager, just let's talk about Linux distribution. So I'm sure if you have heard about anything at all about Linux, you have probably heard of Linux distribution. Often people call it as a distro. And if you see Linux, it is different as compared to Windows or Mac. The reason being is in the Linux world, we have many organizations and many communities or many people that contribute to the source code. It's an open source code. And as you see here, the distro has the various components. And I'm sure we all know that Linux kernel is a core. So apart from core, we also have open source applications, the free applications, Office applications. And we also have distributed distro-specific packages. So in this case, we also have our own package. For example, YAST. So it's our own package, and we also have some of the applications like Acrobat Reader or graphic drivers, and all these are like kind of packages. The packages is a collection for software. So apart from these packages, we also have support. We also have the documentation. The point is the distro is the more of a it's a packaged version of an OS which contains many other things. So when it comes to the Linux OS, we always think about the Linux kernel. Yes, it's a Linux kernel is core, but apart from core, we have so many other things. So we as a SUSE, so we have our own distro, and we have our own dedicated packages, and we combine all the stuff and we release as our own OS, distro OS, right? And as you see, so we have so many packages, and the purpose of the package is for various functionalities. And all these packages are combined into modules. And based on current enterprise needs, we have various modules. And one of the modules is common for everybody is the base system, which contains the packages which are necessary or required for OS or kernel. And Vin, you want to talk about what are the modules which are required for SQL Server?
Yeah, Balaji. Actually, as Balaji just mentioned, packages, modules are a collection of packages here, and there are several modules that actually SQL Server depends on if you want to configure certain functionality. So, for example, if you really want to work with SQL Server with containers, you're going to actually need the containers module that's offered by SUSE, and that's going to contain multiple packages, which includes Docker runtime engine, tools, as well as several other components that allows you to run containers, right? And for example, if you want to set up HA, right, high availability, to configure this with AGs, you're going to actually, for HA, what you're going to need is the HA package, which is offered here, and this helps configure some of the pacemaker, the tooling that enables you to set up HA amongst multiple SUSE instances.
Yeah, thanks, Vin. So apart from the modules which are required for SQL Server, we have other modules too. So let's talk about the development tools. So we have necessary packages which are required for the developer, like Python packages for the development tools module. And if you want to use a Linux machine as your kind of Windows machine, we have workstation extension and desktop applications where you can install those, and we can use same as like Windows. So apart from that, some of the important modules we have here is HPC, high performance computing. So we all from the data world, and if we want to process the data, then we need to have the system very efficient. And we have a module, HPC module from SUSE to enable efficient data processing. And most important thing is we have a server applications module, which is like adding server functionalities, the providing necessary packages and tools to make the system is very efficient. And the last one is public cloud modules. We have this module has tools required to create the images so that you can deploy it in various public clouds. The idea is we have various modules for various purpose, and for SQL Server standpoint, you can just pick up the base system and containers and HA. Okay, so let's talk about now we have modules, we know the packages, and hey, if I want to install SQL Server in SUSE Linux, so how I can install? Okay, so we know the pain points of the you developers or DBAs in terms of installation, especially when it comes to the Linux. So we have various ways you can install, and one of the easy ways we all love to use is GUI mode. So we have a desktop module you can install if you are using SQL on-prem or bare metal scenarios, and that is as equal as your Linux machine, your Windows machine. So you will have the desktop, not great as compared to the Windows, but you'll have a good desktop where you can use similar tools and functionalities what you have been using in Windows. So apart from that, we also have a command line, and Jipper is the command line manager for installing, updating, and removing your packages, and as well as the managing the all our repos. So if you want to install a software in SUSE, the first is you should add the repository. Again, the repository is the collection of a software. So if I'm talking about MS SQL repo, means all the packages which are necessary to run Microsoft SQL Server on Linux. So the step what we do is first is grab the repo, then just go ahead and install. So Jipper also gives the additional functionality. Hey, you want to check the package dependencies, because the package has sub packages or other packages to make the software to work. If you want to check the package dependencies, sure, yes, you can check it. If you want to see the package info, sometimes if you want to see which package you are running, sure, you can go and check it in package info. If you want to search the package, you can do the search the package. So all these are the commands you can run it at command line. And if you want to have the more information on the Jipper, just you can go through the link here, and Jipper gives you other options also if you want to check the patches, information, etc. So in a nutshell, Jipper is your friend to install any software in Linux from SUSE side. And if you want to install Microsoft SQL Server in SUSE, you can do it through the Jipper, and we'll talk about that. So one of the core thing is we as a DBA or as a developer, hey, if I want to use the softwares, I want to install, and installation should be a magic or easy in terms of, it should be very easy. And so Microsoft and we simplified the installation, and installation is very easy. We call it as installation 1, 2, 3. The step one is go and grab the repo and add it in your Linux box. It's easy. It's a single command. Just run that command and give that repo location, and magic is done for you. Then once you have the repo, you just run the installation, and yeah, so the Jipper will install it. Once the installation is done, then you just do that post-installation setup to configure your passwords and what kind of version you are using, etc., etc. It's all done for you. So all these details, installation instructions, all these things are available and in the link mentioned here. And so I'll just run through all these commands in one of the VM. And again, so you can install SQL Server in various ways. So one of the various options. So one is in this demo, I'm going to do it in cloud. You have bare metal. If you want to use your laptop, sure. Linux lap, SUSE Linux, yes, sure. So for this demo, so I'm going to just use the cloud, and the minimum things, if you have 3.5 gig, that's enough with SUSE Linux. And so I'm switching to my terminal. It's called Putty. So, and if you are Windows background, you would have heard about it. This is an interface interface to connect the Linux machines, and we also have other option called VNC server. You can set up the VNC server on Linux, and you can just access it. The other option is if you want to, if you're a GUI fan, just you can install desktop module. But desktop modules are available only for on-prem or bare metal scenarios. In the cloud, you can't install desktop modules. So I have a VM as a minimum VM, and I'm just connecting to my VM and to set up Microsoft SQL Server. So the step one is we'll add the repo package. So it's easy. It's just I'm going to this site and okay. So if you see here, this is from I'm telling Jupyter, hey, can you please add this package, and the package location is here. Okay. So it seems like I did not copy the URL properly. Okay, yep. So I grabbed the wrong. Okay, so if you see here, the package is added successfully. And if you want to check the package, you can see that package info, Jupyter info, MS SQL. So you can see the package name, the package repository is this, and it's from Microsoft. And if you want to search the packages, as I said, okay, so these are the packages available. And if you want to see the dependencies, so you can say that Jupyter, what is my dependent package on MS SQL server -HA. Okay, so these are the dependency packages. So once you have the package, then you can just install, and then you just have to grab the keys to refresh the package. Then all the repositories have been refreshed. Then just install. So it is grabbing all the packages and it's installing.
So at this point, when Biology actually installs, the package manager is smart enough to actually resolve all the dependencies as well. So here, not only are we installing SQL Server, but we're also installing all the dependencies required for SQL Server that depends on, for example, security libraries for some of the security features that SQL Server depends on.
So installation is going on. It's 93%. It is installing MS SQL Server package.
Hopefully this is not stuck.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Maybe it's taking some time to just unpack here. Give it a few moments.
Yep. So installation is done, and at this point of time, the SQL Server is installed on SUSE Linux, and you can just run post installation instruction. I'm going to pick up developer version. Yes. My super password.
Yeah, so what the package manager actually does is it lays down the bits on the system, but in order for SQL Server to actually start, we need to configure a few things such as choosing the edition, like you normally would with the installer on Windows.
Right. So installation is successfully completed. You can see that here setup has been completed successfully, and SQL Server is now starting.
Great. So with that, so far, what we've covered was just laying down the bits, actually getting, looking at the package manager itself and how powerful it is in resolving dependencies and installing SQL Server itself. So now that SQL Server is up and running, Balaji is going to keep talking a little bit about how the system itself starts up the SQL Server process.
Right. So in Linux world, we have a service called systemd. It's a system daemon. So this is basically controls all the processes for the user installed softwares. So it also gives the ability to manage your processes. For example, if you want to start, stop, or if you want to enable or disable, so it gives you all the ability to manage the process. And this can be done through the systemctl. So we'll talk about systemctl in details. So you want to talk about MS SQL Server service daemon?
Yeah, for sure. So as Balaji just mentioned, systemd manages user processes, as well as user services, and this includes the SQL Server process itself. And how this works is with a systemd unit config file, and usually this ends in .service. So if you look at the very top of this screenshot, you'll see that we are looking under the folder of user library systemd system, and we look at this file called SQL Server MS SQL Server service. And usually a file that ends in .service encodes all the details about how should the process actually be controlled and supervised by systemd. Right, so systemd being the main suite of processes controlling the SQL Server instance. So looking at this file, we're not going to walk through every single line, but some of the key points here is if you look at the second group of text under bracket service, you'll see exec start. And what this means is how does this process, which process to actually run to start? So under opt MS SQL bin SQL Server, this is the actual executable, if you may, that it will start up. And it starts that up. So if I were to change this line to point at some other process, MS SQL Server.service will actually start that process just by changing that line, right? But a few other more important things here, for example, is, restart on failure. So if the system detects that the SQL Server process has failed for an unintended reason, which is a non-successful exit in this case for terminology purposes, the systemd will actually attempt to restart the SQL Server process. But restarting SQL Server process could be problematic if it's constantly restarting in a very short amount of time. So if you look at the next group of text underneath it, we actually state to the system, hey, don't restart SQL Server if it has been restarted more than 3 times within 2 minutes, because restarting it and tearing it down consistently could cause problems for the system itself.
So
I'm going to pass So I'll pass it back to Balaji to talk about this is the automatic on how the systemd controls this SQL Server process. But you as a user also has the ability to manually control the process as well. And Balaji will walk you through some of that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Vin. So the basically MS SQL service dot service or MS SQL service dot D daemon service tells to the Linux OS, hey, what you have to do. For instance, if you see in the screen, hey, this is my service, can you please start it? Okay, yes, sure. And what happens if there are some issues while starting the service? Can I start it? Yes. So basically, this service file gives you all the information for system D so that it can start, stop. And as I said, so we have a system CTL, system control, is the interface for the system D. So you can start or stop a service by just with a command system CTL start MS SQL Server stop. You can see the status, and if you want to enable or disable service, sure, you can do that. You can enable and disable it, and if you want to reboot or shut down, sure. So the basically system CTL gives you ability to manage start, stop, enable, disable, everything. It is like a controlling. You can control the process. So I can show you quickly. So as I said, system CTL status. Let's check, see whether SQL Server is running or not. MS SQL server. So you can see that the status here is active running, and it is running from 5 minutes ago. And it can also shows you what is the PID, and it can also shows all the information for this process. And let's go ahead and stop it. So I'll just stop the service. So it stopped the process. Then if you want to check this, you can check the status. See, it's inactive, dead. Let's go ahead and start the service. And let's go ahead and check the status. Yep. So it's active and it's running.
Yeah. So, that's, what Balaji just shared was, it's really good that we know how to actually manage the SQL Server process in Linux, but this also applies to any process on the system, right? Not just SQL Server, what we're actually sharing here. But it's actually also very common for folks and admins who manage SQL Server instances to want to know more about the resource usages. So, what is the equivalent, and how can someone do that?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question, Vin. So far what we have done is we grab the packages and we install it, and we have seen how you can control or manage the processes. Now, since SQL Server is in Linux box, and the most of the time, whenever the database is slow, the first thing comes in the mind is see how the server is doing. Right, so one of the easiest command we have, and most of the widely used command is stop. Okay, the top command is the same like what you have in Windows Task Manager. So it gives you the real-time information of all the running tasks and processes. And if you can see here, first one is PID, processes, and you can see right now in my VM I don't have anything. So MS SQL process is running, and you can also see which user and what is the priority of the task, and CPU utilization, memory utilization, time, command, the various aspects, a very quick and easy view. So apart from this, if you want to dig down deeper, like, hey, I want to see what is the disk, or I want to see what is my IO doing, and I want to see what is my network stats, what is my page stats, what's my system stats. So we have a package called dstat. So I'll just yeah, so this is the top we just talked about, and we have a package called dstat. So this is the dstat is a combination of some of IOstat to monitor your system input and output, VMstat to monitor your memory utilization, then ifstat to monitor your network usage. So combining all this package into a single package called dstat. So it gives you the CPU stats, disk stats, network stats, paging stats, system stats. So all the necessary stats to require to monitor the processes.
So yeah, so actually, quick question, Balaji. When would someone actually use dstat versus top? Because the first thing you showed me, the equivalent here was top.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Vin. So if you are debugging some performance issues, or if you want to monitor if you want to monitor the SQL for various intervals, so you can use the dstat, and you can record all the information of the dstat in a file, so that you can have that file for your debugging or your analysis purpose. And top gives you the quick overview of whatever the system processes currently running. And the most of the time for the debugging and analysis, so dstat is the right package. And so I will show you certain commands, and I will also show you how it works. So anytime when it is slow down, and if you want to see on the system side, host point of view, if you want to see what's happening, so I would recommend use the dstat, because it gives you all the stats. Okay, so dstat. So just if you type dstat, it gives you the whole lot of information, right? If you can see, starts with your, on the left-hand side, you have a CPU, followed by your disk, followed by your network, followed by your paging, page sets, and followed by system. So let's say if I want to see only CPU, so you can just do this C. So it gives you the CPU info. And if you want to do disk, you can do it. And so one of the interesting thing I observed when I'm using SQL Server, especially when it's slow, as we know, OS is controls I/O and all your disk. So all your disk IOs. So whenever it is slow, one of the possibility, you can just see how is the read and writes to the disk. That is one place you can immediately come and see it here. So how much is the buffer and what is the read and writes, and you can also check what is your network stats and how much packets you are sending and how many packets you are getting. And you can also see that page stats P. So which are the pages right now, all the page stats. So all this information, what you can do is you can log in a file, and you can keep it as a running process, so that it can log every information based on the certain information, certain interval, and you can use that for debugging or analysis purpose. So let's just go ahead and log this information for a file. So I want to just log my disk. And output and file is, let's say, disk performance.txt, and interval is 5 seconds. Okay, so what it does is every 5 seconds it go ahead, so it monitors the disk read and writes, and it logs into the file. So we can go ahead and check disk. So you can see that this information. So essentially, when we are debugging, we will be debugging in various aspects, and it is difficult as to opening so many terminals and keep eye on it. The best way is just log that information in a file for specific intervals, and you can collect these files, and you can export this file to a central repository, and you can do the analysis. Now we have seen on the system standpoint, so what are the things you can monitor? So the core thing you can monitor processes, disk, network, page, system stats. And it's also the good idea to check. So what's happening in SQL side, and you can go ahead and check in SQL logs in one of the log directory, and it will give you the all the error and necessary information for debugging. And if you want to see, no, I want to see further down what's happening in the system level through the logging. You have the log directory. You can go ahead and check the information in the logs also. And if you want to see where is your data directory, so it's here your data directory. So essentially, in the system standpoint, you are going to monitor all the resources is one aspect. Another thing is also go ahead and check what's happening in the SQL side also. All the logs, you can go ahead and check all the logs. So now we have seen how we can monitor the resources on the system side. So we want to talk about how you can monitor SQL Server.
Sure. Thanks, Balaji. So, actually up, the first 30 minutes to all the way up to now, everything we've discussed so far is we've really treated SQL Server as a black box, meaning, everything that we've shared about system CTL, using DStat, using top, and in fact, even how SQL Server emits logs, all these aspects is not only applicable to just SQL Server. If you can use the same commands and the same processes and techniques to monitor other things as well on your system. And I know that this session is really about Linux fundamentals and how do you interact with SQL Server from the Linux host perspective. But I actually want to take a moment to mention that you're actually not starting completely from scratch just because you are using this on a new OS, because a lot of the details that you can get out of SQL Server is built into SQL Server itself. So for example, as this diagram mentions, we're not just looking at it as a perspective from a black box, but there's also a lot of tools and observability APIs that we can use within SQL Server. And we've shared this slide in a previous webinar if you missed it. For example, these are the set of tools that work across both Linux and Windows. So already you're not going to be in a completely unfamiliar area if you're getting started with Linux. You can still connect to it using SSMS, SDT, as well as some of our newer tools and CLI tools such as Azure Data Studio and other command line tools such as SQL CMD as well. And when I'm talking about observability APIs, I'm really talking, mainly about some of the DMVs that SQL Server offers, and this is the same across Linux and Windows here. And to monitor SQL Server, you can also use X-Event sessions, which is configurable with T-SQL or SSMS. We also have an updated SCOM pack that works with System Center that can be used to monitor SQL Server on Windows as well as SQL Server on Linux or in containers, in fact. And this is available today. We've also been working with our third-party solutions. So, some of our partners that offer monitoring solutions, we've worked with them to ensure that their solutions work monitoring SQL Server no matter where it is. And last but not least, what we're seeing recently is, a growth of open source solutions as well. And I'm going to demo that shortly. So with that said, actually, let's just go ahead and, use some of the tools and connect to a SQL Server on SUSE instance. Yeah, so actually we're going to start with just using Azure Data Studio, and so here I have a query. For example, if I wanted to get data about connections and sessions about my SQL Server in Linux instance, I can query system dm exec sessions, and this same query is going to exist the same on Windows or Linux to talk about the session. So let's just go ahead and run that. And here I can see all the sessions that are currently active against my instance, right? So again, same thing whether it's on Windows or Linux. And in fact, all the DMVs mostly work. And with that, I can just I can look. So here I actually have a dashboard, and this is built on Grafana, Telegraph, and InfluxDB. And this is a collection of open source technologies. And what this graph is actually doing is just querying DMVs from the SQL Server instance. So here I can see all the transactions per second, transactions write, transactions, user connections, all sorts of stats where, it's available across Windows and Linux. So here I can grab wait stats, memory details, and this dashboard is actually fully open source. In fact, the person who actually wrote this dashboard, some of you may know her, her name is Tracy, and she's been working in this space, working with open source technologies to create these solutions for folks who want to monitor SQL Server on Linux or SQL Server on Windows, in fact. So with that said, I'm just going to pass this back to Balaji to just wrap up a few more, key commands that that might be very helpful to you before we go to Q&A.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Vin. So far what we have seen is how we can easily install and you can easily manage and how easily you can monitor the SQL. Now let's talk about certain packages which are useful for the DBAs. So one of the very important thing the DBAs do is the backups. So we have a package called cron job. It automatically runs and you can do that your backups, you can schedule your backups, and so based on various needs, it has a syntax to follow. So as you see here, you can schedule based on more minute, hours, etc. So you can take a backup. So the cron is very useful package to run the backups. So apart from cron, so think about a scenario where you have 2 or 3 database servers and you want to keep on logging through the putty. So every time when you get into the putty, it will ask you to what is the username, what is the password. So entering username and password is sometimes if you have more servers, it's difficult. So in the Linux side, we have you can do SSH password passwordless logins. So what it means is you can generate a key from your one server and you can copy that key to the other server, so that whenever you log in to the other server, it uses that key. So basically, we are trying to simplify login experience by making passwordless login. And you can configure this from the Windows side also through the puttygen. Since you are generating a key, you just give the key location to the puttygen. The puttygen happily grab that key and it will enable you to seamless login. So as soon as it will not ask you to log in the password, and this will especially helpful when you have many servers, when you're trying to debug, when you're doing something, not to open too many putty terminals. So the other thing I want to talk about is just a comparison snapshot of the Windows world and Linux world, and these are the I can say very base fundamentals commands you interact day to day, creating the directories, removing the directories, checking your IPs, editing, copy, right? So you can have the similar kind of functionalities in Linux through the command line. And so moving on to the helpful resource. So I know we have in this time we couldn't cover much. So I want to talk about 1 or 2 important things from this resources side. So it's very important to know about NTP, network timing protocol, because we have in real time in a perfect world, we have so many databases. We want to synchronize the timings. So NTP is a good option, and we have an NTP package included in the OS. The other thing is, if you want to have extra layer of security in the network, we have a SUSE firewall. So you can just configure the SUSE firewall. And the other thing is, if you want to learn more about IO scheduling, so we have information here. So you can just use it. You can just use the link which is listed here down, which will talk about the IO scheduling and other helpful links to get started on Linux, SUSE Linux. So I just want to summarize what we spoke so far. So in terms of the simplicity, it's very easy to install, and we have everything is built in terms of managing and monitoring your SQL Server processes. And just when I showed you how easy to manage or monitor from a SQL Server standpoint through the open source solutions. So we are running PaaS virtual webinars, and this is our 3rd webinar. We have already covered 2 webinars. One is SQL Server on Linux as a modern data platform, and in last month we have covered databases and containers and how you can run the databases in SUSE containers platform. And next month we are going to cover important topic HA with SQL. And please look for the invite from PAS organization. And the last one is we have promotions offers going on right now. So if you are using SUSE and Linux for MS SQL, then we have 100% discounts and free patches and maintenance for 1 year. And I believe Microsoft is also providing discounts on their software side. And this is only applies to the BYOS, not applicable for OEMs. And yep, so that's all we have for the day, and time for Q&A.
Yep. So how do we, so I guess just a quick question from Balaji and I to the moderator. How do we want to take these questions? Actually, so what we're going to do is we're going to just take a look at, so if you have any questions at the moment, please just. Oh.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm in a conference room, and apparently the power strip I was plugged into wasn't plugged into anything else. So all of a sudden my laptop said, "You're running dead. You're about to die." So we do have questions, and I can give them to you aloud if you want.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, and there's some really good ones. Okay, so one of the first questions was, can you demo the GUI version, or at least how to invoke it and show the initial screens? So basically, if I wanted to use a GUI,
yeah,
you know,
sure.
and I usually like to, how would I do that?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and I just have a backup slide to show. So sure, I can quickly show you how the GUI looks like. So
I'm assuming this question is about addressing, hey, how do we actually use a GUI tool to install SQL Server or get back? Was that the
manage
question?
it. So you've installed and you've started SQL Server. Well,
Yep.
Great, but you know, how do I see what databases are there and what
Yep.
data is in them? Query it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I guess so. There's a two-part question here, really. One of them is from the perspective of the SQL Server product, and if we're talking about that, tools such as Azure Data Studio or SSMS will give you insight to all your system data, all your database objects and servers that are currently online and which you can query in databases. For example, if I want to see which databases were available, I can just connect with ADS on the very left side here. I don't know if my screen is still shared. Hopefully it is. I can just take a look at all the databases available, right? And here I don't have any user databases. Here I only have system databases, but tools like SSMS continue to work as is.
Right, and okay, yeah. So on the Linux side, let's say if you want to use a GUI-based experience to install SQL Server, so first you need to have the desktop module, or yeah, and once you have the desktop module, we have AST, so I can show you how it looks like quickly. So this is what you see if you have AST. It is same like having GUI mode experience, GUI mode experience. You can see everything, and you can use this for doing certain configurations. For example, let's say if you want to set up software rates, and etc. And if you want to configure the packages and network services, you can use it. So if you want to do the file partitioning, yes, you can do that. It's a GUI-based experience for setting up SQL Server. Yep.
Okay. Another question was you did the system CTL with enable. What does that actually do? If I run CTL enable or CTL disable, what does that actually do?
Yeah, so I think I don't know if folks in the chat can see can actually see the answer here, but there are several commands and for system CTL, and you can take a look at that command utility to get all the further details online. But enable, what this actually does is at start time, at boot time, it will say, hey, I want you to enable this unit file. So which means at boot time, the system D will read the SQL Server unit file and enable it. So if you restart your server and you had it enabled, that process, SQL Server will start up. However, if you had it disabled, this is not to say that you are turning off your SQL Server instance at the very moment, but when your system starts up the next time, system D will not read in the unit file.
Right.
So in other words, it changes it instead of automatic, it makes it manual because you can still manually start SQL Server, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So how do you change the data directory? Because you showed during the setup, where it puts the data by default. Can I change that and change the log directory?
Correct. You could change the data and log directory as well as some of our the air file directory even. So if you look online under, so we have a tool that we call MS SQL Conf, which we use to run setup. That very same tool can also be used to change the log and data directories. And all this information is available online if you just search in a query and what you're looking for. Now, so at startup time, there is a default log directory. You can also change at setup, you can also pass in set of environment variables or a configuration file, which will say, hey, look, I want you to place this in this new or different log or data directory. And this will allow you, this configuration file can be duplicated maybe 100 times if you're trying to duplicate these configurations across 100 servers. So you don't have to manually run MS SQL Conf 100 times.
Oh, sounds good. Automation, always a good thing.
Yes.
So is there an equivalent to Windows Cluster SQL Server in SUSE?
Yes, there is. So one of the things we talked about really early on in this conversation was about the HA module, right? Now, SQL Server on Linux, the underlying cluster technology that we support is Pacemaker. All right, so that would be the equivalent. But however, Windows clustering does not work across Linux and Windows. But this is a really good. This is actually a really good segue for our next webinar. Yeah.
And yes, and to add what Vin said, in next webinar we are going to show how you are going to set up the cluster in Linux, and next step 2 is how you are going to configure HA. To our Pacemaker cluster.
So don't miss that.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say, for next webinar.
Okay, so you've got a reason to tune in next month for the next session. Yes. I know I will be. The next one is, can we create named instances?
So at the moment, there's no named instances available for supported on SQL on Linux.
Okay. The next one is, do we have the features that we've grown to know and love on Windows? File streams, file tables, partitioning, things like that.
So I don't have off the top of my head all the details, but yes, we do. So things where there are certain, so I think the way to answer this question is really, if there are specific Windows specific constructs, some of those features will not work natively on Linux, and it may not make sense. But file stream does work.
Okay. The next one is, okay, there are a number of people saying thank you. We've got a question, Azure Data Studio or SSMS? I guess is that, do you have a preference? Do they both work as a GUI for SQL Server?
Yeah, so we get this question quite a bit in different contexts, but one thing I like to mention is, how Azure Data Studio came to be was that, we have, as we're starting to see more developers and clients come from Linux as well as Mac, and continue very strong growth on Windows, we feel like we needed a GUI tool on those platforms as well, which is why we started Azure Data Studio. Now, that doesn't mean we're not investing in SSMS. We are strongly and equally continuing to invest in SSMS, right? So these are two different tools one just built just to help those who are from a different client. And they both continue to work just as well on, again, SQL Server on Linux or SQL Server on Windows.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got a question. Any considerations for migrating our databases from Windows to Linux?
So I think so the answer always depends in terms of what you mean by consideration. Are you talking about features, or are you talking about feature sets, or are you talking about, how do I would say definitely just get started. The easiest way to see how your application works is just to spin up a SQL Server on Linux instance. We learned that it only takes 3 commands to get started to spin up an instance. Take a backup from Windows and restore it on Linux. So even backups across different host operating systems will continue to work, because it is, at the end of the day, the same SQL Server engine.
Okay. I hesitate to ask this one. This is your question out there. Why would I pick SUSE over Ubuntu or Red Hat for running my SQL Server instances?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure Balaji would give an excellent answer. I'm going to give the SQL side of this. I think that one thing that's really good, with all our, whether you choose to run it on Windows or Linux, it is a preference choice of the customer. So from my perspective, at least, if the customer is already running a lot of SUSE in their own environment, there's really no reason for you to use Ubuntu or Red Hat. You should continue to use SUSE if you're already using SUSE.
Right, and
from that perspective.
Sure. And from the customer standpoint, so one of the main differentiation is the support. So we have a priority support, or very good support for the customer on maybe 24/7 channel. And we also, the other thing is, we also work with Microsoft to improve the system performance overall, and to make things easier for SQL side of story. So for instance, so I can just call it one of the scenario, one of the thing we are working is something called, with a magic button, system should get tuned for the best performance for the SQL. It is called tune profile in the Linux world. So we work with hand-to-hand with Microsoft to improve, to optimize, to make things better and faster for the customers.
Okay. The next question, do we have always-on feature available?
So the answer is yes, and we will be covering that next week. Next month.
Yes, yes. Next webinar is yes. I would request and encourage for next webinar covers HA scenarios, always-on, and other aspects.
Another reason to tune in next month. Okay, yes. Is there a best practice for SQL setup on Linux for SQL Server, or best practices if we're going to do this?
I think there are. So again, this answer depends on how many instances you're trying to configure, what features you're trying to configure. For example, if so just going back to a previous question earlier about changing the file directories for the SQL Server database files. If you're going to set up, if you're going to set this up if you're going to set this across the farm of 100 instances, the best practice would be to use a MS-SQL conf file. Right.
And so right now, so this is from Cloud Story, or things from cloud. So in Microsoft Azure Marketplace, we have a SQL Server image with SUSE OS. It's already available, and you can just explore or try it out and see how it is. And yeah, so it's readily available. You can just, it's in few clicks. The instance is up.
Okay, we've got about a minute left. Is there a recommended allocation unit size for volume formatting in Linux for SQL Server?
So we on the file system, we recommend XFS and ext4 for SQL Server, and I'm sure the document we have a certain best practices listed in the helpful slide. And yeah, definitely we have docs.
Okay. Do SQL cumulative updates still require a reboot in Linux?
So,
So the answer, so no, actually, you just have to install. So you just have to.
Hang on, I got something coming up here. Let me mute myself.
Yeah. So the answer, the question was, the CUs still require reboot. So again, this depends on what your workload is doing at the time of the upgrade. But all you have to do is lay down a new package in bits, and this will automatically run. So you just have to go on Zipper install, and you install the latest package, and this will actually override, and you don't need a reboot. Okay, it sounds like that's all the time. That's all the questions we have. That's all the time we have for questions at the moment. But if you have any questions, do reach out, and we'll be sharing this deck shortly for those who've attended this conference, and you'll have all the resources there online as well. Thanks everyone for attending.
thank you all for your attendance.
Kevin, are you still here?
Yes.
Yeah, could you end the meeting, go to the file menu?
Leave the webinar, exit. Yep.
Yeah, I'm still here. What was it now?
Go to the file menu and end the meeting.
File and
Exit
end
and
webinar.
Yep.
Done. End webinar for everybody.